we are communists, and quite often when you talk to someone about communism in Canada, they'll say, oh, but I'm not a communist. I think we need a mix of communism or socialism and capitalism. And Canada is the perfect model because Canada has all of the best elements of capitalism, free market competition, production for profits, ingenuity, entrepreneurial spirit, and we have free healthcare and we have public companies, public services like Canada Post, for example, the post office. So Canada is the best of both worlds. Well, we are here to actually debunk that. We're here to talk about Canada Post because there is actually a crisis of the post office, and it is resulting in a continual conflict with the union, the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. There was a strike last fall, and there's a ongoing conflict crisis that is still happening this year. We could see another strike. I am joined today. My name is Joel Bergman. Welcome back to the Revolutionary Communist Podcast. I am here with Donovan Ritch, who is a member of the Revolutionary Communist Party, who has written quite a bit about the struggle at Canada Post, about the history of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. So, we are going to discuss this issue and bring a Marxist analysis to this question, which I think is absolutely vital, especially in this moment, to understand what is happening, but also what do we do, because Canada Post is actually under threat. If you notice in the news, there are increasing calls to privatization, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, there is I guess we'll just start with what is going on. I don't know, Donovan, you have a few words you want to say? What's the situation with Canada Post?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on the pod, Joel. I think actually we were just talking about sports before we started filming here, and obviously the NHL playoffs are going on right now. The Stanley Cup is about to begin, and sometimes I find there's analogies, with sports to the class struggle and to the struggle between the workers and the bosses. And I think, when you're talking about Canada Post and the Canadian Union of Postal Workers, I mean, this is like a fight that's been going on for decades, many decades now. And it's almost analogous to sort of a rivalry between two, kind of historic teams. Let's say, just for example, the Toronto Maple Leafs and, the Boston Bruins.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's a reason.
No comment.
There's a reason I picked those two teams because, I think in recent history, this rivalry has been rather one-sided, let's say. The Boston Bruins have gotten the best of our team because I'm a Torontonian, of course.
Okay.
Multiple times in the playoffs, devastating losses, And I think that's kind of been the story of the struggle between CPW and Canada Post management over the last several decades now. I mean, the union's really been put on the back foot, going all the way back to really the 1980s.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a union that I think we'll talk a bit about this later, but it's CPW is a militant union that's built this tradition. Going back to all the way back to the 1960s, but beginning in the 1980s with Brian Mulroney, they've been on the back foot. They've been on the defensive, and this has been reflected in the fact that every time that they have gone on strike since 1981, they have been either legislated back to work or ordered back to work. More recently. And I think, I think that's been a big part of the story. Now, I think you and I, Joel, we've I think, been active in the labor movement for a number of years, let's say. I personally can remember being on the picket lines of the postal workers in 2011 and 2018. And then most recently with the strike in the fall. So I've personally seen a lot of this firsthand, and obviously, that's what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah. So, picture of almost a never-ending crisis or conflict. Canada Post management has continually come to every negotiating period, rain or shine, it seems to be the same thing. If any postal workers are listening today, you'll know that this is true. they come. We want flexibility in labor. They want ability to hire part-time workers. They want changes to the pensions. They want they want to abolish. Well, now the latest thing, they want to abolish door-to-door delivery. They want to just all sorts of cuts, all sorts of changes that they want to put forward. Now, quite often people can think these people are just assholes. These people are just bloodthirsty bastards. And definitely Canada Post management does seem like particularly evil people, if you want to put it that, capitalist overlords. The funny thing is it's a public company, right? It's a crown, it's a crown corporation. But they have these capitalist managers managing it. But getting beyond the individuals, I guess... is this just, I guess maybe we just address it, is this just the product of bad managers? Is there something beyond that crisis? I don't know if you want to try to address that.
Yeah, well, I think, the CPW leadership has been talking a lot about, bad management being responsible for, why they've gotten into this financial crisis, really. I think we have to call a spade a spade. I mean, the post office just released their year-end operating income and expenses figures, and at the end of the year they had a $1.3 billion operating deficit, and that's against a revenue of only $7 billion. So in fact, that is a fiscal deficit of nearly 20% year on year, which is I think we're seeing. Different national governments racking up huge debts in this period. I mean, but 20%. I mean, I think that might be beyond anything massive, that I've seen in this recent period. And so, I mean, this is a real crisis. And I think the key question is, is this just a crisis of bad management, or is this something deeper here?
Yeah, exactly. Well, so you had mentioned already that this goes all the way back to the 80s. That is a very particular time. Why the 80s? Well, you had the post-war boom. That's the epoch in which the postal service basically was expanded massively. There was a massive expansion of the productive forces of capitalism, actually. Big economic growth all throughout the 50s and 60s. This came to an end in the 70s. In the early 70s, you had the crash. And then what happened was everything that was created in the post-war period started to be unsustainable now. And there started to be increased tax, whatnot. By the time you get to the 80s, there's a massive problem. There's a huge economic crisis. And this is where you have you mentioned Brian Mulroney. Brian Mulroney was just one of many of these types. You had Margaret Thatcher in the UK, Ronald Reagan, the so-called neoliberals, or whatever you want to call them, that basically put forward austerity measures, cuts, things like that to try to really make the government slimmer because they can't afford it. And this has actually just continued since then, all throughout the 90s, all throughout the 2000s. And what's behind this? The crisis of the capitalist system. That capitalism has gone down. Growth figures, every single decade since the 1960s, basically, have been down, 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 down. And so, there's less money. There's less money to go around. There's less to fund social services. And then, the post office, also added to this, is not the only game in town. Canada Post is not the only delivery service. They're not the only service that delivers mail and parcels. Also, the market has changed somewhat. Less people use the like letter mail, emails, electronic, right? Banking. I don't get my bank statements by mail anymore. I get them electronically. So that's changed. But then, of course, everything's gone to parcels. But Canada Post is not the only game in town. So this is a big backdrop of this. And this is massively expanded in the past, decade, less, especially the last handful of years, where more and more people order online, especially from providers like Amazon, that's a big one we'll talk about today. And if you look at Canada Post's business model, they're actually getting out competed. So it is bad individuals, but these bad individuals are making decisions in a context of increased capitalist crisis and what I'd say like a competition from not just Amazon, but we'll talk about this a bit more too. You have other delivery companies like DHL, Purolator, UPS, FedEx, etc. I think there's much more than that. But yeah, this is the situation that led to, maybe we can talk about this a minute. Last year, we had a strike. So yeah, you had a strike of, I think it was 32 days. It was one of the longest strikes that the postal workers ever had. But yeah, maybe we should just pause and talk a little bit about that. Why did that strike happen? What led up to the strike? What were the issues at stake? And what was actually the result of the strike? Yeah. You want to say a few things?
Yeah, if I could actually just go back, a moment, I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the post-war period, going all the way back to the 50s and the 60s, there was an economic boom, and capitalism could afford to, hand out reforms to the workers, particularly in Canada, right? Yep. Universal health care, that we all cherish so much. But that was never just given, that was fought. And, that was fought and won for first in Saskatchewan, by the CCF. And then it was extended nationally in the 1960s. And that was a way to, I think, cut across of the appeal of communism, honestly. In the worker states and the Soviet
Union.
During
the Cold War, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And but of course, the crisis of capitalism, really began, broke out in the 1970s and particularly in the 1980s. And ever since then, it's been, just seems like a never-ending stream of attacks and cutbacks and, but you had this model of, social services, right, provided by, a single, government provider, and I think what you've seen in healthcare is really illustrative as well of this process, right? Where we're really beginning to see, the partial privatization of healthcare now in many provinces, and opening it up to competition in the private sector. And what does this do, right? This undermines the public healthcare system because, doctors, nurses, they go to private providers maybe because they can get paid more money to do so. And this, undermines the quality of the service that the public system is able to provide and provides a justification for further privatization. And this is really what's been happening with Canada Post for, I think, a long time now. I mean, I think, I'll maybe make one slight correction to what you said, which is that, like, Canada Post has had a monopoly, still has a monopoly on letter delivery.
Right,
that's not open to the private sector. But of course, in parcel delivery, this has been a free-for-all.
It's not useful to have a monopoly on something that's going away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, it's obviously, with the, dawn of the internet, e-commerce, people are just not sending letters anymore. But of course, this parcel delivery industry has, been, massively boomed with the,
exploded,
the dawn of e-commerce, and particularly over the pandemic, right? Yeah. There was a massive increase in, people ordering things online rather than going to retail stores. And I think initially, actually, Canada Post really benefited from this. It's sort of, to their declining revenue from letter mail, they had this boom in, revenue from parcel delivery. But that's quickly been eroded. I think just in the last 7 years, I think there's some numbers that show in 2018, Canada Post had 62% of the market share of parcel delivery. And just 5 years later, in 2023, this is now down to just 29%. So they rapidly lost their market position to these private for-profit companies like UPS, FedEx, and Amazon. Most importantly, I think we should probably talk a bit more about Amazon, maybe in a bit. But I think this is kind of the context in which this recent strike broke out, and management to basically try to regain some of that market share is trying to gut the union and gut the service, gut the letter delivery service in particular. They are seeking to, yes, end daily door-to-door mail delivery for consumers, not for businesses.
Of course.
And they're also trying to end a moratorium on closure of rural and suburban mail depots, which is something that the union has previously fought for and won. So, these are a couple of their demands that are on the table. But they're also trying to gut the working conditions of their workers and make them much more like their private sector competitors, which, again, I think we'll talk more about. But, I mean, just to speak for now on the strike, I mean, what they're seeking to do is to bring in part-time workers. And they're also seeking to bring in Amazon-style, what they call dynamic scheduling, which allows them to basically just, dynamically change the schedules on a daily basis according to letter and parcel volumes and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I think those are the major demands that are still on the table. There were more at first, back in the fall. They were also seeking to gut pensions, to gut benefits. They were seeking to change all new hires to market pensions. They were actually trying to take away, I believe, benefits for retirees. And so, yeah, it was a wholesale attack really on everything that the union has fought for and won in the past period. And so, yeah, this is what led to the fall strike.
Yeah, so this is just a concrete example of everything we've been talking about. This is probably the most brutal attacks they proposed in one go. And this is happened pretty much every time, where the negotiating period lasts so long. Like, they were at the table for like a year before the strike, around a year as far as I'm aware.
Like 18 months.
Like, oh, really? Before the strike? Okay, I thought, anyway.
No, you're right, actually.
It was a year, yeah. And then it's been 18 months that this has been, or over 18 months now that's been going on. But why? It all gets back to there's really irreconcilable differences here that can only be settled through struggle. We'll get to that at the end. And that's where the union was pushed on strike, and they went on strike. We'll talk a bit about how that strike went and why actually they didn't win. But yeah, the result was if people remember last year, not so long ago, the end of last year, the strike was in December, right at the busy period when everyone's using Canada Post for parcels for the holidays and everything. Strike had been going on 32 days, and the Liberals, very unpopular, Justin Trudeau, very hated in a way. People were sick and tired of that guy. And minority government propped up by the NDP. And the NDP is a Labour party, ostensibly, supports Labour. But the Labour minister came down and used this obscure clause in the Labour Code to basically order the workers back to work. Basically take away the right to strike without a debate, without a vote in Parliament, which is quite unprecedented, but it happened, I think, 3 or 4 times last year. 3, I believe. And so, the strike ended. The union leadership accepted it, said, that's what they said, we got to go back to work. And they started a 5-month period, which just expired last Friday, about a week ago.
May 22nd, yeah.
Yeah. In which they were going to have a commission established, headed by this guy named William Kaplan. And the commission it's supposed to be an inquiry, basically, into the problems of Canada Post and make a bunch of suggestions. So this is the period that you had the strike, it ended, the workers were sent back to work, their right to strike was basically taken away for 5 months. They're in official strike position. They can go on strike now, but they have decided not to. But maybe let's just go into you mentioned all these attacks the union is opposing. The union went on strike. Then they had the right to strike taken away. It's been 5 months. What conclusions has this commission come to? Has the commission came down and said, oh, well, let's be nice to each other, and the union should get a bunch of stuff and maybe give up a little bit, or I don't know.
Yeah, I think the thing is, like, this is all completely unprecedented.
Yeah.
This is all like new territory, things that unions have never had to face before. I mean, or the CPW is well acquainted with back to work legislation,
Yeah.
but
You need legislation to legislate it, though. Yeah.
exactly. And so, yeah, Article 107 of the Canada Labor Code, very obscure clause, never really been used before, I think, as far as we can tell. And yeah, it was used for the first time 3 times last year, as you mentioned. And yeah, actually, this Industrial Inquiry Commission is also out of the Canada Labor Code. It's the very next article, actually, Article 108. And yeah, it's aptly named industrial because as it was actually set up, I guess the mandate that was given to William Kaplan, who headed the inquiry, was to evaluate the future of Canada Post and solutions for making the corporation viable. And it's very important to look at the wording of how this mandate was given. It was given to look at this from an industrial and a customer point of view. So nothing there about labor or the union or the workers.
Yeah.
And so I think from the outset, Kaplan was given a mandate to side with management.
Yeah.
And so it was really, I think, set up from the beginning in this way, and
By the Liberals, yes.
by the Liberals. And so, Kaplan released his report on May 15th, and surprise, surprise, he agreed with every single demand that management was putting forward that I just mentioned.
Yeah.
And not only that, but he even went so far as to recommend to management how they could enforce this agenda on the workers, how they could force this from another obscure clause from the Canada Labor Code, which is Section 108-1.
Okay.
Which states that, and again, I believe this has never been used. I mean, we can maybe do some research to find out, verify this, but as far as I can tell, this has never been used either up to this point. And so, I can't remember the exact wording of it, but in essence, what this clause allows the government to do, what this clause allows management to do is after an industrial inquiry commission has been called, it allows management to force the workers to vote on their final offer. So that is like typically how labor relations work, is that, union might go on strike, it, might, spend some time at the negotiating table, and they might come to a tentative agreement. That is the elected negotiators, in concert with the union leadership, might agree to something that is on the table, that management is presenting, and agree to put that to their workers for a ratification vote.
This is taking that away.
This is taking that away. This is taking away the consent of the union leadership and forcing the workers to vote on their offer on their terms. And so this would be another unprecedented assault on the fundamental democratic rights of these workers if it were so used. And Kaplan is recommending this. And the irony of this is that, Kaplan is an arbitrator. He's a very experienced arbitrator. He's done some really high-profile cases of binding arbitration, which, if our listeners are not familiar, is a mechanism where, and this has typically been used in the past with back-to-work legislation, where an arbitrator will just decide on the contract unilaterally in opposition to the workers and management agreeing on something. And so, this has been typically used in the past, but I think the irony of this is that Kaplan said that binding arbitration, he's an arbitrator, he said binding arbitration would not work in this situation because arbitrators tend to not, go too far in either direction. They tend to just, decide on something close to the status quo of how things were in most cases. And so because management is seeking far-reaching concessions in this case, he basically said, no, if I were the arbitrator, I would not, give you your desired result. And so he's recommending going this other route.
Right. So, Kaplan's report So yeah, doesn't want to go binding arbitration. So he's just proposing, if you read it, what he's basically saying is yes, the business environment has fundamentally changed, which is what we described, which is true. The business environment has fundamentally changed. The letter mail has fallen in usage. Also their percentage of the parcel market has fallen massively. They're getting outcompeted. So that's true. Kaplan then says what the problem is with Canada Post in relation to the competition is that the competition has, quote, lower labor costs, and, quote, they do not have collective agreements restricting the exercise of management rights. Basically what Kaplan's saying is they pay their workers less, and their workers have less benefits, and they don't have collective bargaining that tells the management that they can't just do whatever the hell they want. So he's saying a bunch of the things that Canada Post, or CUPW, Canadian Union of Postal Workers, that have fought tooth and nail for are not sustainable. And he concludes with this. He says, without immediate adjustments allowing it to affordably and efficiently focus on 7-day-a-week parcel delivery, its market share and its losses would continue to grow, and it would not return to financial sustainability in the short, medium, long term. That is probably true. In the current situation, that seems to be true. But then he is recognizing the brutal nature of capitalist competition, Kaplan, which is just a fact of that's what capitalism is right now. But then he says his solutions are completely reactionary. As I've already quoted, he said basically the problem is labor costs and the fact that you have a union. Then he says that we need, quote, in-depth transformative change, possibly including to the pension and retirement benefit plans, which is, yes, not surprising that this is precisely what Canada Post management has been attacking. So Kaplan ends up lining up completely behind them. This is the Kaplan report that was published on the 15th of May. And then the union was in official strike position on the following week, on the 23rd, I think it was.
Yeah, 22nd.
Yeah, 22nd. And they announced that they were going to go on strike on the 22nd or 23rd. Yeah, 22nd. And they kind of blinked, and they didn't go on strike. We can get into let's save a bit that for the end of why they didn't and why I think this they've all just everything that the union leadership has done has kind of led them to this position where they're in a bit of a weakened position. But yeah, this is the Kaplan report, and it is a result, as we've already described, a result of capitalism, a result of the crisis of capitalism, and Kaplan is just sort of staring reality in the face that the competition from the capitalist market is undermining public services. We already mentioned healthcare. It's undermining healthcare. They privatized hydro services in Toronto a handful of years ago, or in Ontario, a handful of years ago. They've partially privatized some of the aspects of healthcare. And yes, Canada Post now is in the crosshairs, being outcompeted by things like Amazon, Purolator, etc. So maybe we can briefly talk about what is the CUPW leadership, the leadership of the union, what do they propose as a solution to this? Because Kaplan does discuss it in his report. He dismisses it, but maybe we can just briefly talk about what they're proposing, and then we can kind of investigate that,
Yeah. Actually, before we get to that, I wanted to just say something about the question of the competition, if I could.
Yeah, sure.
Who is Canada Post up against in the market, right? Because Kaplan is saying, Canada Post has to be able to compete in the marketplace, right? But what would that take? I think we have to look at Amazon really here to get to the bottom of this.
That's the big one, yeah.
I mean, Amazon right now is just eating everyone else's lunch. I did a little bit of research, for the pod on this. And Canada Post is competing with UPS, FedEx, DHL, TFI International. But Amazon is outcompeting everyone right now in the marketplace. And I think it's worth looking at, what has gotten to them to this place. But even to just sketch a bit of their growth in the last 15 years, how they've come to be in this really dominant position in the marketplace. I was just looking at their revenue growth going back the last 15 years, and it's quite incredible. I mean, it actually, when I was looking at the numbers, it was funny. It actually, the pattern was almost exactly the same to our own growth. In the RCP, in the Revolutionary Communist Party. And obviously these are completely different scales. So I don't want to mix this up.
Amazon is brutal libertarian capitalism.
Yeah.
That's destroying people's lives.
Yes.
And then revolutionary communists are growing because of the result of capitalism destroying people's lives. So it's not that opposite.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've both us and Amazon have doubled roughly every 3 to 4 years over the last 15 years. So Amazon, started with, I think, something like 50 billion in revenue in about 2010. We had about 50 members in 2010. And now they most recently in 2024 had 638 billion in revenue. And they're just about to eclipse Walmart as one of the largest corporations in the world.
Not surprising.
Yeah. And we're roughly around the same. We have just over 700 members. So, 1 billion to 1 comrade, that's the ratio. But I'll take the comrade every day.
So the competition, very important. Mainly Amazon. Maybe the question is not just Amazon, but who Amazon use for deliveries. So they're quite flexible. They use a lot of different delivery services. I believe they even use Canada Post a bit. But the big one, they use this, it's actually a Canadian company called Intelcom. I think they rebranded called Dragonfly or something like that.
Yeah.
But they actually were started 20, 30 years ago, can't remember. And actually, funny enough, Canada Post at one point, 20, 25 years ago, bought the majority share in Intelcom. So if you think about it, the Canada Post management was betting against themselves. They did the same thing. They own the majority. I believe they own the controlling share in Purolator, or the majority share in Purolator, which is in direct competition with Canada Post parcel delivery. So if you think about the Canada Post management, these capitalist managers are actually directly undermining the viability of the public service that they are supposed to manage, and then they're coming to the workers saying, we have to cut the wages. But in particular, yes, all of them, I was looking it up a bit. It seems like DHL, UPS, FedEx, Purolator, all these companies, a lot of them have unions. Some of them, the majority of the workers are unionized. Some of them, it's a minority. But some of them, they do have to deal with unions as well, which means, what does that mean? It means the cost of labor power for the capitalist is higher. And it means actually the more they're spending on, if you know your Marxist economics, the variable capital is going to be higher because they have to contend with a union. Capitalists don't like unions because they want to spend less. And left up to, we were talking about this before, left up to its own devices without any interference, the market will tend to push wages down to bare subsistence. And I believe that's what we're seeing with something like Intelcom. Amazon is everyone knows this because of the Amazon unionization drives that have taken place in, you had the one in New York, and now you had these ones in Quebec. What did they do? They closed their operation. They closed the warehouses. They closed the operations in Quebec because Amazon is a very anti-union place. Like I said, it's a libertarian capitalism. So they also don't like union. They don't like using union delivery services. They would prefer to use ones that don't have unions. Why? It's going to be cheaper. It's going to be more flexible because the labor is going to be more directly submitted to their whims. It's connected a little bit to their next day delivery services and stuff. There's a whole bunch of horror stories about places about delivery services like Intelcom, but that seems to be the major competition. It's services like this, non-unionized, hyper exploited. I looked it up. Intelcom delivery drivers, wages. It's weird because it's piecework, so it's not necessarily hourly rates, but can be as low as minimum wage. Whereas I believe Canada Post,
I think they get paid. I think it's just over $1 per parcel.
Parcel.
Deliver,
yeah. Anyway, so they're if you add it all up, I looked at on average, it could be around $608 a week. That's at the low end. It could be a bit higher, but that's like minimum wage. Canada Post is I believe delivery drivers at Canada Post starts at 22, and then there's a clear path to get and then there's benefits, there's pensions, there's stuff on top of it. So connected to what Kaplan's saying, that model with having workers with good wages, good living conditions, good benefits, good pensions is incompatible with the needs of capitalism at the given moment. And everything's going towards this very competitive, low-wage thing. I believe Intelcom even uses temporary foreign workers. Why? Everyone knows about that. It's a hyper-exploitable section of the population who don't even have they don't even have all the rights that, because they're not actually even Canadian citizens. So this is really what Amazon or Canada Post is dealing with. It's hyper competition, especially from companies like Dragonfly, Intelcom, like that Amazon primarily uses. Everyone's seen it when you order a parcel, next day delivery. Some dude runs up, throws his parcel around, takes a picture, runs away because it's a piece where there's all sorts of horror stories that people have had to deal with.
Yeah, can I share a few of those?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, actually, just to come back to the question of Amazon itself briefly. I mean, how has Amazon gotten to this position? Being the dominant force, one of the largest corporations in the world. I mean, it's the same story with Walmart, actually, right? What does the market reward? It rewards ruthless, union crushing efforts, right?
Yep.
And anytime workers at Walmart in the past organized a union, closed down the store.
They did that in Quebec as well.
Yes.
Same thing.
Almost immediately, right? And so, yes, it's completely ruthless. And this is how they, have these, really like extremely high rates of exploitation and rates of profit at the end of the day.
And they outcompete those who don't do that.
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
what's happening right now.
Yeah, but I think another thing about Amazon is that there was really a revolution in productivity that was brought about largely with the use of robotics and AI. And actually Amazon just changed their whole distribution model just 2 years ago. And in 2023, they shifted from having one national network to in the U.S. To basically having 8 separate regional networks or regional hubs that were largely self-sufficient. And actually this allowed them to lay off something like 30,000 workers and to increase their profits exorbitantly.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I think, this is how...
Well, Canada Post would need to do something like that to compete.
Exactly, right? Yeah. And so what would this require Canada Post to do? I mean, basically to lay off, their entire workforce, decertify the union, and then hire an entirely new workforce, non-union at wages, poverty wages. This would require an attack on the working class that has never been seen in this country. But to come back to Intelcom, because I think this is, the most illustrative of, the kind of exploitation that, Amazon uses with its contractors, actually. So Intelcom, the language that Amazon uses is, they call them delivery service providers. And I looked on their website a bit, because on their website, they actually have a pitch. They say, oh, well, you want to have your own startup and become a delivery service provider, do you, and they use all this, language like, are you a rule breaker? Are you, the type to go against the grain?
Okay. Do you want to create modern day slave labor? You can make a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly. And so, Intelcom is, I think, one of Amazon's main DSPs in Canada. And how they, got to this position. I mean, Joe, you spoke about piecework and the kind of labor that they use. But what are some of the results that this has produced, right? I just did a cursory search on Google about Intelcom, and I found about like a dozen articles on the CBC and other, local media outlets talking about, just horror stories with Intelcom, both from the standpoint of consumers, not receiving packages they ordered or receiving them, like a week or 2 weeks after this, supposed, next day delivery was promised. And, heard stories about, children not getting their Christmas presents in time for Christmas. And but I think even more importantly than this, the stories of the workers' experiences with this, the fact that, with piecework, right, it rewards, obviously, workers cutting corners and delivering things as quickly as possible. So, you mentioned, workers just throwing packages on porches and stuff. But yeah, there were stories about Intelcom drivers routinely driving the wrong way down one-way streets in order to take shortcuts, and this causing accidents, injuring people. There was one story, of a worker who slipped on ice and basically broke their back and had to leave the country to get the treatment they needed. This is the kind of thing the kind of conditions, that this is producing. And actually the most egregious thing that I came across was a story in Kelowna, British Columbia, where I guess the workers there, I guess they must have like a day and a afternoon shift, and it was about the afternoon shift workers who I guess started around 4 o'clock, and they were increasingly complaining that they were being forced to work late into the night to get all their packages delivered, frequently having to work past midnight to get their packages delivered. And they're talking about how we can't even see the addresses on the houses because we're delivering in complete darkness, and all this the safety issues that this presents. There was even one case where a homeowner who had a package delivered, because no one expects to receive a package in the middle of the night, thought somebody was trying to break into his home, so he came out with a gun and actually shot at
that's a workplace hazard.
yeah, the delivery drivers. So this actually led to a breaking point where one worker made a very simple request. Made a request to be able to start his shift earlier so that he wouldn't have to work so late. And what happened the very next day? That worker was replaced.
Okay.
He was told not to come back to work. He was fired.
Yeah.
He was fired. Let's call it what it is. But this, because this was an experience that all workers were having to endure on a daily basis, this actually led to a wildcat strike of non-unionized workers. Over 100 workers, I think, the very next day went on strike and organized a protest outside of Intelcom's office. And I looked at a picture of these workers who had all gathered for this, this militant action, and they were all, it's just a picture, but to me it looked like they were looks like almost entirely South Asian workers, probably, either temporary foreign workers or international students.
Yeah.
And so just adding to the point you made about the the kind of labor.
Hyper-exploitable.
Hyper-exploitative, and I think that's the situation.
Yeah, and didn't that strike happen around the same time the postal workers strike happened?
Yeah,
that's also another thing.
Exactly the same time in November 2024. Yeah.
Anyway, that's an important point because it does lead into something else that we have to talk about here: what to do. But I had mentioned a little while ago about what the union's saying. So just very quickly, what the union is saying. So generally speaking, or what the union leadership, what CUPW leaders are saying is, well, this is a public service. We shouldn't have to compete with these like substandard wages and working conditions, this gigafied economy. Okay, I agree with that in general. We shouldn't have to deal with that. But then the problem exists nonetheless, that this is what capitalism has produced. And this is what Canada Post is competing with. So I guess the situation would be then, what do we do? So how do we overcome this problem? We can't just stick our heads in the sand and act like it doesn't exist. For example, I do think this is a little bit like that, or not that it doesn't exist, but some of the suggestions that the Canada Post leadership has put, or CUPW leaders have put forward, is that, maybe we don't need to just do deliveries. We could do, because posties they go to all the houses in the damn country. We could do senior check-ins, or maybe we could open up artisanal markets at postal depots and sell stuff and have community hubs there. Okay, I could see maybe, but when I think about that,
it'd be nice.
Well, some of that would be nice. I mean, but the thing is, basically what you're saying is this isn't a post office. If it's a post office, it's a post office. And you're getting it's an admission that they're getting outcompeted because they're suggesting that they do things that aren't the post office. Or they even open up a postal bank. It's like, we got banks. There's lots of banks out there. I don't see how that's going to solve the problems of being outcompeted in deliveries. Now, some of that could be nice. You could maybe implement that. But I think, my opinion as a market, that under capitalism, that type of thing would be very difficult to implement. You then all of a sudden they'd be competing with all the banks, and they'd be competing with other artisanal markets. You're going to sell stuff. You're going to be competing with other places that are selling stuff. It doesn't really get you out of the problem. So that's really what they're suggesting. Kaplan dismisses this out of hand, of course, because he is a capitalist guy himself, and he's accepting the logic of the capitalist market. The Postal Workers Union leaders, you can tell they're kind of trying to reject the logic of the capitalist market, but so far as I'm aware, they haven't really put forward an alternate model to that of private competition, which is the root of what is causing this issue in the first place. So, maybe we should move on to the question. So far, it seems quite bad. Doomsday. And I know we have a lot of members of our organization that are postal workers, and I know they've reported there's quite a lot of people are kind of depressed, seems. Went on strike, big strike. It was one of the longest strikes they had last year. Didn't win. Got their right to strike taken away. Now we're back 5 months later, and it looks like the report is basically siding with management. And people, the union threatened to strike. They didn't go on strike. They instead stopped working overtime, which isn't going to work, in my opinion. That's sort of like trying to strike without striking. And so I think a lot of workers are like, well, what's the point? How are we going to win? And we have to discuss that, because it isn't lost. I think we don't think that this is lost. We don't think that is hopeless. We think that we shouldn't be depressed, that there is a way to win. But in order for us to win, we have to have a good plan. And the plan, actually, in this instance, yes, we should strike. The only way to actually win is going to be to strike and to fight. But it has to be much broader than that, because there is this issue in the which has to deal precisely with the capitalist market. And we should deal with that. So what do Canada Post is getting outcompeted by, I think they're getting outcompeted by all these companies, but they are mainly getting outcompeted by Intelcom, Amazon. So what the hell should the union do?
Yeah, well, I think at root, this is, Kaplan has said, Canada Post management and, the media, has frequently said this is an existential crisis of Canada Post. And, this is the one point where we agree with Kaplan. This is an existential crisis of the post office. And I think, the CPW leadership, I think, has said correctly that, Canada Post shouldn't have to compete. And we agree with that. But the question is, how can we get there ultimately, right? And I think they don't really answer this question. They don't provide an actual vision of a real alternative, a fundamentally different alternative, not just, ticky-tack, postal banking here, seniors visits here, but really an inspiring, broader vision of what, a postal service that doesn't have to compete, might actually look like, and what, that would take to get there ultimately. And so I think, from this standpoint, maybe I'll come back to my sports analogy that I started at the beginning, right? With any, fight or rivalry, and when you're on the back foot, sometimes the best defense is a good offense.
Yep.
They often say in sports, and I think this is exactly the way forward here. I think, the union has to go on the offensive, both in terms of, presenting a vision of what this alternative could look like and how, we get there, but also in the immediate terms, in terms of, like the need to fight and what methods we need to win in the immediate fight. And so I think, from this standpoint, I think we've been discussing a lot about this and discussing with we have a group of comrades in the union who have been actively organizing, and we've been discussing this for some time. And I think really, what the union has to do is to, take the fight out from the immediate confines and actually put forward a broader vision. And so I think this starts with taking the fight to the private sector companies, right? And actually, and the thing is that CPW is not alone in this. I think we mentioned earlier, like a good chunk of the staff in these other companies are already unionized.
Yeah, and didn't DHL just voted to go on strike?
Yeah, that's right. They're planning to go on strike in June.
And they're delivery drivers. So
Exactly.
they're delivery drivers. Cup W delivery drivers. They're just delivering stuff,
That's
and
right.
they're workers. They just happen to be in different companies. One's public, one's private. I mean,
yeah, and so I think the large majority of UPS workers are organized with the Teamsters, as well as Purelator workers are also with the Teamsters. There's a section of workers with DHL that are organized with Unifor, and FedEx is mostly non-unionized, but they have, I think, FedEx is more of a air freight specialist, and they have a group of pilots actually with the Airline Pilots Association that are unionized as well. And so I think really what needs to happen is, we're seeing actually the development of common fronts in Alberta right now with all the public sector unions, right? Forming a common, strategy to face the employer, to increase their strength and increase their leverage. And I mean, a common front has existed for a long time in Quebec amongst the public sector unions, and they've, been able to make real gains on the basis of this strategy. And so I think really,
you don't let them divide you. That's the point.
Exactly. And so I think what really needs to happen is, the Teamsters, Unifor, and CPW need to form a common front to work together, to fight together, and most importantly, to engage in a mass union drive to unionize all the non-unionized workers in all these companies, starting with Amazon. Now, obviously, there have been union drives underway at Amazon, with some of these unions already, but I think it's occurring in too much of a piecemeal fashion. This warehouse, that warehouse, there really needs to be a large-scale concerted drive built on the basis of collaboration between all these major unions, which by themselves are already very powerful, but together would be so much more powerful. And so I think this really needs to be the starting point for really going on the offensive.
Yeah, so one united front against the bosses, essentially, no matter who they are, demanding, I would even say, because they're using the shitty labor practices of one company to outcompete against the other, and then capital tends to go where it's most profitable. So it'll go to the Amazons of this world. It'll go to maybe I don't know, maybe Purelator is more competitive than Amazon because they have lower wages. I don't know. I looked at it. It seems like they do. So capital will go there. That's how it works. It's like a bloodsucker, It's going to get in where it can get the most out of it, squeezing the workers.
To make it so that capital can't go anywhere without facing a unionized workforce.
Yeah. So you should unionize all the workers, and the union should not actually compete against each other. The part of the problem is they negotiate separately. Sometimes you have that in the public sector, which is why they formed the United Front in Quebec, is that the government would say, we only have this much money in the budget, and then the nurses would negotiate separate from the teachers, who would negotiate separate from the public sector workers or the admin workers. And so forming the United Front said, we're not going back until all of us get what we need. And we're going to get all these. And in terms of delivery drivers, you're a delivery driver. Everyone should get the same. And it should all be good. It should all be high level. Everyone should have. Instead of saying what's going to happen is the company that has the crappiest labor standards is going to win, which means that means good jobs. Unions are going to get destroyed. Good jobs are going to get destroyed. Good benefits, good pensions are going to get destroyed. Capitalism will drag us down into darkness, into barbarism, basically. So I think this idea, it really goes to one of the foundation, we talked about a bit on the podcast, the foundational ideas of the labor movement itself. Workers of the world unite. An injury to one is an injury to all, right? So really take, and not just look at this kind of like narrow, I would say corporatist unionism, which actually, and we see it here in this example, doesn't benefit even the workers. Quite often union leaders say, oh, but we can't worry about the other stuff. We're just looking out for our own members. Well, in this instance, this actually does not benefit the members, Cup W members. You have to take the fight out. Otherwise, you're screwed. And that's ultimately what we're seeing here. So, yeah, unionization, a common front of unions, is definitely the right way to go here. And we think everybody, whether you're a postal worker in member of Cup W, or maybe you're a delivery driver for DHL, or you work for UPS, everybody should be getting involved. Pressure the union leaders. We need to raise a campaign for that in the labor movement.
Can I actually add one thing?
So go ahead.
Yeah, I think one thing I forgot that's also important part of this is internationalism.
Big time.
Right? Like Canada Post is not the only public postal service under attack.
Yeah.
The U.S. Postal Service is under a massive attack from Trump as we speak.
Yeah.
And so I think, there's another case to be made for cross-border solidarity.
And unionization drives have happened at Amazon in America and in Canada, and I think in other countries as well. Yeah. So, what's Trump said it's an artificial border. We're like, it is an artificial border for the workers too. He means it's artificial for capital. He wants to get capital, a free reign of American capital in Canada. We want to build militant traditions that transcend these artificial boundaries. That's an important point. But yeah, I think another point here. So if you did unionize Amazon, what did they do? Well, in Quebec, they shut down. And we've seen them, this is what they tend to do. We mentioned Walmart does it. So if you did raise this campaign, it is likely, and then you'd have people like Kaplan saying, well, that's not realistic, market forces. And the Canada Post management and the owners of all these companies would say, oh, we can't compete like this. And capitalism, basically they're admitting that capitalism needs subsistence wages and crappy conditions. That's what capitalism is. Well, what do we do? Well, Amazon just shut down in Quebec because of a unionization drive. And yeah, there is actually a boycott. There was a boycott campaign that developed. I think it's still active in Quebec. This is boycott Amazon. Well, we would say don't boycott them, nationalize them. If any of these companies, whether it's Purolator, DHL, or whatever, or Amazon, Intelcom, say, oh, we're closing shop if you unionize, nationalize.
And occupy them to begin with.
Well, this has to be done. This has to be something from the grassroots, right? It has to be done from the rank and file. Because it ultimately is how we defend good jobs, how we defend living conditions. You unionize all the workers. You form a united front. The workers occupy. They try to take it out. You occupy the plant. You don't let them. You don't let them shut it down. And then you demand, look, Canada Post has a monopoly on letter delivery. Should have a monopoly on parcel. You make one united delivery service that has a monopoly on it. And really with good jobs, that's the only way to really guarantee good wages, stable jobs, stable working conditions, good benefits, good pensions, good vacation time, all that stuff. Quite often I hear these hypocritical liberal politicians like, we're Canada, we're different. We have health care and we believe in taking care of workers. I'm like, I am so sick of that hypocritical bullshit, for lack of a better term, because this is happening under Carney's watch. He just got elected to defend Canada from America. Actually, one thing we didn't mention, a bunch of these companies are majority owned or big shares owned by American finance investment companies like BlackRock, Vanguard. Amazon is like the quintessential American company. Jeff Bezos, one of the richest men in the world. Okay, you're talking about defending Canadian sovereignty. I'm talking about defending Canadian jobs, defending Canadian living conditions, defending public services. And what are the Liberals going to do about this? Well, we already seen what they're doing about it. They're coming down on the side of crushing good Canadian jobs. Actually, and to the benefit of American investment firms who are coming in. So we can't rely on the Liberals. We can't rely on these capitalist politicians. Only the working class and a united working class. And really, that's what the RCP fights for. And we fight for this in the unions because it can't be done without the unions. So one public nationalized delivery company, guarantee good jobs. This leads to another question. Many people might say, but
Actually, could I just quickly
Yeah,
add
go
before
ahead.
we move on?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, yeah, just to add to that point, I mean, Amazon cannot be trusted
It
to be
cannot be
left
trusted.
in private hands, nor can any of these other companies. I mean, look at what they're doing.
Yeah,
As soon as the workers unionize a few warehouses, they shut the entire network down across an entire province.
yeah.
You know, this is just scorched earth tactics to the detriment of, you know, workers and consumers
Also,
all across the province.
a lot of people talk. Oh, Jeff Bezos is a big Trump fan now. Okay, expropriate him then. You take away his business. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that difficult. The socialists are the ones that really want to fight this stuff. The liberals just complain about it. So they don't have a problem with American capital doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, all the things I was saying about Amazon earlier, you know, like it might have seemed like I was, you know, almost admiring Amazon for all its, you know, revolution and sort of, you know, production that it's brought about. And yeah, I think, you know, I don't love Amazon, but you know, it's not because of the company; it's because of the ownership.
Yeah.
You know, it's because Jeff Bezos is squandering all this, you know, revolution in production just to enrich himself at the expense of the workers. I mean, this technology could be used to better workers' lives, under workers' ownership and control collectively. It could be used to shorten the working day and, you know, make working conditions much easier at the end of the day.
Yeah. So on that, I think, yeah, there's an important thing. I think a lot of people know Amazon's got shitty working conditions that sort of come into the public consciousness and lately, especially because these union drives and stuff like that. But like my next day delivery, a lot of people, you know, they like that. They've come to like it, especially during the pandemic. And Canada Post doesn't deliver that quick sometimes. Are we defending? I guess we have to address that. Are communists? Because quite often this is something that the right wing says. Communists are defending shitty things. No, I think we have to reject that. We are not defending shitty things. And actually, when you read the Kaplan report and you read what the Canada Post management are saying, is they think in order for them to have weekend delivery and to have like next day delivery, like Amazon, to compete with them, they need part-time precarious labor. One does not equal the other. That doesn't make any sense in my opinion. No, you don't need part-time precarious labor. You can have full-time good labor delivering next day packages as well. Just pay them good wages and hire more people. So it's not connected to that. But it is true that Amazon has revolutionized delivery, has revolutionized getting consumer products in the hands of the consumer as quickly as possible, and all that stuff. Marx talks about all the way back in the Communist Manifesto how capitalism, the bourgeoisie revolutionizes the productive forces, right? But at the same time, he also talks about how they create their own gravediggers. So Amazon is creating an army of gravediggers, of really angry working class people. And I think that's happening all over, not just in Amazon, and companies all over the place. We're starting to see that more and more. We see this hatred against capitalism. Even if people haven't theoretically worked it out, they haven't read a word of Marx or anything like that, there's this anger. And that's actually one of the reasons why the Revolutionary Communist Party has grown. We've grown rapidly. I think there's been interest in communist Marxist ideas, which has allowed us to do this podcast today in our headquarters here in Toronto. So, but yeah, I guess related to that, so then someone might say, well, then why is CUPW rejecting the part-time? Why are they rejecting the flexibility of labor? And aren't you just defending an outmoded, backwards way of delivering stuff? Well, this I would say, it is understandable that the union doesn't trust the management. And anytime the management suggests we want to make it a little bit more flexible, and we want to make dynamic scheduling, and we want to bring these part-time people, and the union's like correctly saying, we don't trust you. We do not trust you. Actually, what has happened in every union contract when they have allowed a two-tier type situation, where you have some workers brought in on lower wages, part-time schedules. What happens is that portion of the workforce grows, and the full-time portion decreases. And they eventually use it to attack the working conditions of the full-timers. So, correctly, no, Now, the only way to really get around this and have a proper discussion about the real functioning of the post office would be under workers' control. We take the control out of the hands of these capitalist managers, and then you can have a discussion about what is the best way to serve consumers or people who order stuff, who want packages, whatever. And really, I think postal workers know how the postal office works better than anything else. Unite Canada Post with all of the delivery services into one big one, combine all the best technologies and methods with full-time, good pay, good conditions. You can have a fully functional, efficient delivery system that can do next-day deliveries on most things. I think there's absolutely no reason why that can't. But that does take a socialist measure, which is, nationalization here. Anyway, I'm talking for a while, so I don't know if you want to chime in on anything here.
No, I think, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I guess the only thing I would add is a bit of the, concrete experience of what this looks like, in reality. Now, I've never worked at Canada Post myself, but I worked for public transit in Toronto for about 8 years. And I was a TTC worker. I was unionized with the Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 113. That's where I got this cool hat. So I saw this on a daily basis. The TTC is a publicly owned, company. And I think, from the standpoint of, okay, well, how do you run this company in the most efficient way? There's this massive layer of management, this really bloated bureaucracy that runs everything from the top down. And who are the kind of people that, management hires? They hire people, straight out of business school with no actual experience in the industry. And these are the people calling all the shots. They understand nothing of the industry they're actually tasked with running. And so the result is, all this inefficiency. And I'm sure it's the exact same thing at Canada Post, just from discussing with our comrades that are working in the union. I hear more or less the same kind of stories. So, what is the alternative to this? Well, I think, we don't have really any concrete experiences in Canadian history. There's lots of experiences, across the world, through the history of worker struggle and revolutions. But I actually have I think a small anecdotal story to share, I think, in this regard. So I was a streetcar driver for the first 3 years or so that I worked for the company. And so typically, on a streetcar route, there would be a route supervisor that would be tasked with, overseeing the management of the route, making sure all the vehicles, are in service, that they're all properly spaced apart so that, you have regular scheduled service. And I think, something frequent that, Torontonians run into is this problem of bunching when multiple vehicles end up.
Oh Lord, don't get me started.
All bunched together, and then you have to wait like half an hour for the next one to come after that, and it's totally packed. And so this is really inefficient route management, and management allows this to happen on the regular. And so I think what happened one night was that for some reason our route supervisor just disappeared.
Wonderful.
was not managing the route at all, and was not, responding to communication, anything like that. And so what we did, us workers on the route, is that we figured out how to run it ourselves that night. We all just talked with each other at the end of the line. We usually have a few minutes to use the bathroom, have a bite at the end of each run on the line. And we just talked to each other and said, okay, we're going to put the line on what we call headways, which is just you wait a certain amount of minutes till you leave the station end before the vehicle ahead of you. And so this ensures that, the vehicles are all properly spaced apart. And so, just through, communication collectively, making decisions, we figured out how to run the route by ourselves. And I think this is just an anecdote that illustrates the point that, workers know best how to run the industry that they work in. They know all the ins and the outs, all the tricks of the trade. And given the power, we could run our workplaces much more efficiently than these, appointed managers who really, to be honest, like their main role, I think above actually running the service efficiently, is to police us The workers, especially in unionized contexts, they hire these people, who really specialize in union busting rather than actually running a service efficiently. And so I think, democratic workers control, that is the alternative. That is the way forward. That is the way to, get around, the blind alley of bureaucratic management of nationalized state enterprises.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not as though we think just you nationalize everything and everything's fine, and you have these unelected managers at the top that are messing everything up. No, democratic workers' control, fundamentally important. That is what socialism is all about. You need workers' democracy from the ground up. We are been going on a little long, so I wanted to maybe move on to the final point. So this all sounds good. We talked about a bit about, the need to fight, the need to strike, the need for militancy. But I thought we could talk maybe for a few minutes here about, what we think about, I guess, the current leadership of the union, maybe compared to where the unions come from. What did... Because, in any class struggle, I believe the bourgeoisie always, on the surface, have the upper hand. They got the press backing them, they got the government backing them, and they all basically, they have the money and they have the power, right? And it looks like the workers don't have the upper hand. They can't, how are they going to win? And the only way that they actually ever get anywhere is workers banding together in a union and going on strike. But in order to do that, you have to have a confident, bold leadership that explains the situation to the workers and actually leads them boldly in a struggle to challenge the rulership of the bosses, right? In this case, the Cup W management. But I guess, has the Cup W leadership been doing that? And maybe what do we have to say about that? You want to say a few words?
Yeah, so unfortunately, CPW workers have not had that leadership to date in this fight. And, not only have they, not been fighting, as they need to, nor have they really been, mobilizing the membership to prepare them to fight. But they've been actively smothering any attempts to do just that. I think, going back to the point you made earlier about, the current situation, instead of a strike this time, the leadership has opted for an overtime ban.
Yeah.
And this is really quite a meek tactic, to be honest, like in the circumstances. And actually there was a worker, we have a bit of a rank and file group chat going of a bunch of CPW workers. On the day of the announcement of the overtime ban, one worker commented, I thought it was really illustrative of kind of the response of the rank and file, the frustration of the rank and file with, the approach of the leadership. This worker said, where was it? So in response to the overtime ban, he said, quote, "They've done it. They found an even worse strategy than a rotating strike."
Okay.
Incredible. And so, for the, listeners that maybe aren't familiar, rotating strike is something that's been frequently used in past strikes by previous CPW leaderships where, just one city goes on strike one day, the next city goes on strike the next day.
They do that in 2018?
Yeah, they've done it almost every year, 2018, 2011, going back all the way to the 80s. And I think, this can be a useful step towards an all-out strike. But if this is
an escalation.
Yeah, exactly. If this is the only strategy that's pursued, it just leaves the majority of the workers passive and on the sidelines while others are, making the sacrifice of, losing their wages and being on the picket lines. So I think from this sense, what needs to happen is, all the workers need to be out together, getting a taste of their own strength, fighting together on the picket lines. Now, I think, in terms of, what I mentioned earlier, because there have been attempts to do just that amongst different locals in different cities. So, for example, there was in Edmonton, there was an attempt prior to the strike in the fall to organize. So, I mean, the typical thing is that, before workers go on strike, of course, there's a democratic process that needs to be engaged in. Workers need to vote on whether they want to go on strike. And if a majority votes in favor, then all workers are expected to go out together, all in one. And there's different ways of carrying out these union votes. But, one, I think, tradition that we often argue for is for mass in-person meetings of democratic decisions, such as to go on strike. And what the Edmonton local did was not exactly that, but it organized to basically chartered buses to bring workers into, I think, the union office to vote. So basically encouraging,
Great.
mass
Have a mass
participation.
meeting,
Mass participation in a union vote. And they carried this out, I think, I don't know, for at least a few days or maybe a few weeks. And the initial results were overwhelming. 95% turnout of the members to vote to strike. Now, what happened? Why was this not carried out to the end? Well, the national leadership came in and ordered an end to this because, according to them, it violated some, clause in the Constitution about how these votes should take place. So they ordered, they smothered the attempt to actively mobilize and prepare the workers for a strike. And so, I mean, this is really quite scandalous. And furthermore, there was also a vote subsequently in the Edmonton local that was actually the result of an initiative of one of our comrades to organize a vote to defy any back-to-work legislation if it were brought down in advance. And this vote was actually organized and carried through, and it passed. 69% of the workers in the local voted to go on to defy any back-to-work order for at least one day, and to actively, organize to spread the defiance to other locals across the country. And so I think, this was an excellent initiative, and it really showed that there was a desire and a will and a willingness to defy, because this has happened, as I mentioned earlier, to these workers every single time they've gone on strike, and at a certain point, enough is enough. You have to break laws that are meant to break you. Yeah. And so the mood was ripe. I mean, we went to a rally in Toronto the day of the back to work order, and the Scarborough and the Toronto locals organized a protest in front of Krista Freeland's office. At that time, I think the Liberal finance minister.
She would have been the finance minister.
Yeah, something like that. And anyway, there was like hundreds of workers here.
Deputy Prime Minister. She's second in charge.
There you go. And so there are hundreds of workers there, extremely militant. They had union leaders calling for defiance. And at one point, multiple points actually, chants of general strike broke out. And were, wide, everyone was chanting it.
So very militant
together.
Mood,
yeah, extremely militant mood. But okay, well, what did the national leadership do? We already mentioned they didn't defy, so we know this was a fact. And so ultimately, the national leadership failed to carry the will of the ranks through to defy. They buckled at the 11th hour and decided to comply with the back to work order. But it wasn't just that. They actively attempted to smother any attempts to defy. I think the most clear example was in Vancouver, the International Longshore Workers Union, a union with a very good tradition of solidarity and internationalism. They were joining the CPW workers there on the picket line regularly, and they were actively trying to keep up pickets after the back to work order had already gone through, and the CPW national leadership actually through the Canada Labour Congress requested that the ILWU workers stop their picketing.
All right. Wonderful.
Yeah.
An injury to one is an injury to all. Apparently not. It's like, you're not allowed to do that. Those aren't the rules. There have been, as Donovan's describing here, a bit of a lackluster leadership, a little bit of a leadership that pulls back, that is trying to find a way, and you can see it in what Jan Simpson, the president's saying. She's trying to find a way to conciliate. She's like, she wants to be at the negotiating table, But the bosses are the management's saying nope, basically giving them the big middle finger. And Kaplan, in his report, says that he doesn't think that there can be any headway made at the negotiating table precisely because of the situation that we've described here. There are two sides, and the Canada Post is being destroyed by competition, and the Canada Post management, if they want to compete on the capitalist market, they have to fucking attack the union. There is no way about it. And the union leadership is standing in the middle being like, please negotiate in good faith. We think, you got to fight. And the only way to fight, it's because it's a class struggle. How many members? 55,000 members, something like that? The only way to really fight is mobilize the whole members. And the members, they can't just be turned on and off. Like we saw this with the strike announcement. They announced the strike for the 22nd, but there was no vote. There was no discussion. They just sort of announced it. The thing is, hold mass meetings. The members have to be the ones in the driver's seat. They have to be engaged. Otherwise, the strike's not going to be strong. So, really, and don't stifle moods of defiance. You said, they didn't carry out the will of the members. I could already hear in my head one of them, probably an executive, saying, "We don't know. That's not. How do you know that's the will of the members?" Well, I would say, good point. You never gave them the right to vote. I think they should carry out votes. Every single local should vote on whether or not they're going to defy the next back to work order. And let's really make it clear what we're saying. We're saying whether or not they should defend the right to strike. Is the right to strike a right or is it not? If it's taken away every time, it's not a right. And the only way to defend it is in the real world on the picket lines. Give them a right. I guarantee if you would just put that vote in every local, it would pass. Maybe 70%, maybe more. Especially if there was strong arguments by the leadership in favor of it. So defy. So I think really this is what we need. We need a fighting leadership. We need a bold leadership. But unfortunately, it's been a bit lackluster. It's the unfortunate reality of a lot of the labor unions in Canada. They have degenerated quite far from where they used to be, and Cup W is probably one of the best examples of that. We can maybe talk briefly about it. This is not about the origins of Cup W, but I know Donovan wrote an article about this. It's on our website. We'll put it in the description of the show about the 1965. Wildcat strike, actually, a legal wildcat strike of postal workers, which led to the creation of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. But I don't know, you want to say a few words about that and how it's relevant today?
Yeah, I think, somebody listening might say, oh, well, like this is all nice, but, how is this actually going to happen? What is the precedent, for this sort of thing? And you really don't have to look far in the case of CUPW. I mean, it's
the origins of the union.
Yeah, it's a part of their own history. It's how the union was founded. The union was founded through defiance, through a wildcat strike in 1965, which was an incredible strike. I think at this time the workers did have a sort of association, a quasi-union, really more of a company union.
Yeah, it was yellow union.
If we're being honest,
far worse than the current Cup W leaders.
That's right.
Sure, yeah.
That's right. And I think maybe just one quick illustration will show this. Up until the strike actually happened in 1965, the leadership of the association had their offices in the same building as the company.
Yeah, it was a pipeline. The union was a pipeline to be a manager, actually. It wasn't fighting the management. It was active collaborators. So we don't have precisely that. Mm-hmm. But to be honest, some things the union leaders are doing are not that far off of that. They're stifling their members. They're telling them they can't defy. They're discouraging them. And this is precisely what leads to demoralization and people feeling a bit hopeless, like they can't win. Yeah. So there's no middle of the road. We need to learn the lessons of 1965, which was a rank and file road. Actually, the leaders of the associations stifled the attempts at strike, and it was individual locals, Montreal, Vancouver, there was a few others, that united together and went on strike against their own leaders. So maybe something like that happens today. Mm-hmm. Ideally, it happens as a united union with the leaders leading it. But that's going to be needed. But again, as we said, so we need to rediscover those traditions from 1965, rediscover the militant revolutionary traditions of the Canadian labor movement, of the fighting traditions, but not just that, also the socialist traditions. So it's not enough just to fight for the benefits of workers in an industry that's getting out-competed. We have to go beyond the limits of capitalism and fight for a nationalized, one nationalized postal service, full guaranteeing good union jobs, good conditions, good pensions, good benefits, and efficient service as well, which is what we fight for. So that's what we fight for as the Revolutionary Communist Party. That's what we believe the labor movement needs to fight for. And this struggle is not over. They are in the union is in strike position. The question is unresolved so far. The deal that the Canada Post management has put forward is horrible, and as far as I understand, the union leadership is rejecting it correctly. But what's going to happen? Are they going to go on strike again? I hope so. Hope they fight against it. We'll be on the picket lines. Everyone should be on the picket line supporting the workers. But will they bring in another back to work order? Will they order the workers back to work? Well, in that case, they got to defy. They got to defy the law. They got to defy this unjust, anti-democratic law that is constantly imposed on them, and the whole labor movement should support them in that. Draw a line in the sand. Carney said he's different. Carney is not all that different. Actually, is in many ways worse, I think. But so we've been going on for a little while here. I think we should wrap it up. But
can I say one thing quickly?
Final words here.
Yes, it's not so much final words. It's just like practical next step forward, right? For workers, CPW workers, for the broader labor movement and the working class. There's a day of action happening tomorrow on Saturday all across the country. CPW members are organizing rallies city by city. There's one in Toronto that we're going to be mobilizing out to in Scarborough, and there are rallies happening in Vancouver, Halifax, a bunch of other cities. I want to just encourage everyone to go out, mobilize, and I think we'll be there explaining these ideas, explaining our position, and really trying to build a movement inside of the union to fight for these ideas, to go back to the revolutionary roots of the union. And I think that's the immediate way forward, and obviously everything else you said, I think covers it.
100%. So hopefully come out to those rallies, get in touch with us, get in touch with us to help us fight for these, like Donovan said, reestablish the revolutionary traditions of the union, and fight for a socialist alternative to this horrible situation, to be honest. That's what we fight for. Donovan written a couple of articles. We'll put them in the show in the description. I also read an article we're going to publish today about why the struggle to save Canada Post is a fight against capitalism. So we'll put that online today as well, but put it in the description. So hopefully read that. Yes, and get involved. More importantly, I think that is it. Final thing, please help us spread the podcast. Please follow us on podcast. Follow our YouTube channel. Share this with friends. I believe you also should turn on notifications. I think that's a thing, right? Mainly on YouTube. So you just keep in touch. Also, we're getting a lot of comments. We're getting a lot of engagement, especially on YouTube. Great. I love it. Leave your questions. We'll try to answer any question you raise. Leave any little points you want to raise in the comments, and we will attempt to, can't promise we can address everything, but in future episodes, we'll maybe get around to some of your questions. At least we'll respond to you in the comments. But thank you for listening in, and that's it for us today.